This is not a new gun. The design is 30 years old. This is not a superior weapon from a superior industry, because the industry that designed the turret rejected it. This is not even a British howitzer, though the most important part of it is. This is not a story about a Polish howitzer. This is a story about what happens when a nation solves the hard problem and then throws the answer away. Part 1. To understand what Vasil was seeing, we have to go back, not to the invasion, but to a British decision taken in the last years of the 20th century by serious people for serious reasons. The British Army had a gun it was proud of, the AS-90, built by Vickers as a private venture, ordered in 1989, 179 of them, for around £300 million. It entered service in 1993. It was accurate, it was tough, and it was fast. 3 rounds in 10 seconds, into action, and out again in under a minute. In Iraq, the British Land Component Commander, General Robin Brims, called its accuracy phenomenal, and a defence minister told Parliament it managed a 92% availability rate in the desert. The Royal Artillery had good reason to like it. But it had a ceiling, and the ceiling was written into the barrel. The gun was 39 calibers long. Barrel length is the multiplier. Longer barrel, more time for the propellant to push, more velocity, more range. 39 calibers gave the British 24.7 kilometres with a standard shell, around 30 with an assisted round. The rest of NATO was going to 52 calibers. 52 calibers reaches past 30 kilometres as a matter of routine, and past 40 with the right round. The difference between 24 kilometres and 40 is not a specification. It is the difference between shooting at the enemy's guns and being shot at by them. The British knew this. That is the part that matters. They knew it from the beginning. The original requirement had specified stretch potential, extra range achievable by changing only the barrel. The upgrade program was called the Extended Range Ordnance and Modular Charge System. In the trade it acquired a better name, Braveheart. 96 British howitzers were to receive a 52 caliber barrel. Development approval came in September 1993. In June 1999, the Defence Secretary, George Robertson, stood up in the House of Commons and announced the contract. It went to Marconi Electronic Systems, around £75 million. He was pleased to tell the House that the extended range barrels would be manufactured at the Royal Ordnance Factory in Nottingham. About 50 jobs. A modern gun for a modern army. Look at the logic on its own terms because it was sound. Britain had a proven vehicle. It needed only a new barrel and a new propellant charge. It would leapfrog a generation without buying a new fleet. Every assumption in that plan was reasonable. Every professional who signed it was competent. The model worked, right up until it did not. Part 2. The barrel was never the problem. That is the detail that gets lost, and it is the hinge of everything that follows. The 52 caliber ordnance worked. British metallurgy was not at fault. British gunnery was not at fault. What killed the program was the thing you load in behind the shell. A modern long gun does not use a fixed cartridge. It uses modular charges, blocks of propellant the crew stacks like coins, 1 for a short shot, 6 for a long one. It is elegant, and it is the only way to squeeze a 52 caliber barrel for everything it has. Britain first tried a unimodular system. It ran into trouble. In July 1995, the Approvals Committee switched to a modular charge from Somchem, a South African firm inside the Denel Group. It promised something genuinely valuable, dramatically reduced barrel wear. Then it failed a test Britain refuses to compromise on: insensitive munitions, the requirement that ammunition sitting inside a vehicle will not detonate when that vehicle is hit, or burns, or is struck by fragments. It is a safety standard written in the blood of earlier wars, and the Somchem charge could not meet it. So the program died. The forecast service date had already slid from February 2003 to July 2005. Around 2001 to 2002, the Ministry of Defence terminated it, and the National Audit Office duly recorded it among the cancelled. Be precise here, because the temptation is to sneer, and sneering would be wrong. The Ministry did not cancel Braveheart out of stupidity. It cancelled it because a specific chemical formulation in a specific propellant block failed a specific safety threshold. That was a real failure. In isolation, the decision was defensible, but the argument turns on one word. Britain treated a failed charge as a failed program. It threw out the barrel with the propellant, and it never went back. The Royal Artillery kept its 39 caliber gun, and for the next 20 years, while France and Germany and Poland went long, British gunners went to war with a shorter reach than their allies. The turret went on a shelf. It did not stay there. Someone else had been watching the trials. What happened next in a steelworks in southeastern Poland would take 25 years to matter. When it mattered, it would matter more than anyone in Nottingham could have imagined. But first, If this deep dive into British engineering is holding you, hit subscribe. It costs nothing and it helps the channel grow. Now, the record. Part 3. In 1997, Poland went shopping for a turret. Not a howitzer, a turret. That distinction is the whole Polish story. Poland wanted a modern 155mm gun, but it intended to build the vehicle itself in Poland at a state foundry called Huta Stalowa Wola, so it ran a competition for the gun and the turret alone. The German Panzerhaubitze 2000 competed. The British AS-90M Braveheart competed. In June 1999, the British entry won the firing trials, in part, and I am not embellishing this, because the British actually turned up and shot. In July 1999, Huta Stalowa Wola signed a license agreement with GEC Marconi, soon to be BAE Systems, 6 complete turrets, the full technical data pack, the right to build the thing in Poland permanently. Read that sequence again. In 1999, the same firm sold the same design twice, once to the British Army, which would cancel it, once to Poland, which would not, and then Poland very nearly threw it away too, because the Polish chassis was a disaster. The hull drew on the T-72 and PT-91 lineage, and it cracked. Structurally cracked. A report in 2011 blamed the quality of the hull steel. The engine overheated, then went out of production altogether. 8 howitzers were built on that chassis, and 8 were found wanting. Poland had a world-class turret bolted to a vehicle that was tearing itself apart. This is the moment the whole thing should have died. A cancelled British upgrade sitting on a failed Polish hull. 2 national embarrassments welded together. What saved it was the war. In 2014, Russia took Crimea and lit the Donbas, and the argument inside the Polish Defense Ministry stopped being about industrial pride. In December 2014, Poland signed a license with Samsung Techwin, later Hanwha, for 120 chassis from the South Korean K9 Thunder. It was an admission of failure. It was also the correct decision. The first Korean hull arrived in mid-2015. The definitive vehicle passed acceptance in April 2016. A British turret, a Korean chassis, a German engine, a .52 caliber barrel, Rheinmetall at first, later built by the Poles themselves. Polish fire control. They called it the Crab. Here is the number the case turns on. 4.649 billion zloty. Roughly $1.1 billion, 96 howitzers, signed for in December 2016, plus command vehicles, ammunition carriers and repair vehicles, organised into 4 divisional fire modules of 24 guns each. Poland was not buying artillery pieces. It was buying an artillery system built in a factory it owned, on a licence it held outright. Britain had bought 179 AS-90 howitzers and upgunned exactly 0 of them. Why could Britain not simply do what Poland did? Because Britain had bought a barrel. Poland had bought a license. Britain owned the outcome of a program. Poland owned the means of production, the drawings, the tooling, the right to change her mind. When the charge failed, Britain had nothing left to iterate with. When the chassis failed, Poland changed the chassis because everything else was already hers. That is not a technical difference. It is an institutional one, and it is the reason one nation now has a 40-kilometre gun, and the other went looking to borrow one. If your father, grandfather or uncle served with the Royal Artillery, or if you have stood on a gun line yourself in any army, I would be grateful to read the unit below. The people who understand what 15 kilometres of range actually buys you are the people who have had to do without it. Part 4. The realisation arrived in January 2023, and it arrived disguised as generosity. Britain announced it would donate AS-90 howitzers to Ukraine, around 30 in the first tranche, 20 battle-ready, 12 stripped for spares, then more. By May 2025, the reporting was unambiguous. Britain had given away essentially the entire fleet, around 68 vehicles. The British Army no longer operates the type at all. To replace them, the United Kingdom bought 14 Swedish Archer howitzers. 14. The Deputy Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Sharon Nesmith, said Archer fires further and faster than any artillery system previously in British service, and that it filled a gap left by British support to Ukraine. Both halves of that sentence are true. Together they are an indictment. The gap existed. The Archer fires further precisely because the AS-90 could not, and 14 guns is not a fleet, it is a placeholder. The long-term answer is expected around 2029. Now hold that against Poland. In late May 2022, Poland gave Ukraine its first 18 Crabs, out of its own army's stocks. Within about a week, the first battery was firing in the Donbas. By October, the Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov confirmed the true figure: 3 divisional modules, 54 gun howitzers, given, not sold. On the 7th of June 2022, at the Huta Stalowa Wola works, Ukraine signed a commercial contract for around 60 more. 3 billion zloty, roughly $700 million. The Polish Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, called it one of the largest defense export contracts Poland had signed in 30 years. He was not exaggerating. The factory's capacity at the time was perhaps 20 to 30 vehicles a year. They were right that the charge had failed. They were right that a propellant which cannot pass an insensitive munitions test has no business inside a fighting vehicle. What they were wrong about was the shelf life of the answer. They believed a cancelled program was a closed one. In a workshop in Ukraine, a gun commander with the call sign Koluchy of the 26th Artillery Brigade had by then fired both the German Panzerhaubitze 2000 and the Krab. Asked to compare them, he gave the kind of answer only a man who has done the job gives, on the characteristic that mattered most to him, accuracy. He found the Krab to be the more precise of the two. His personal opinion, he said, nothing more. The Panzerhaubitze 2000 is the finest self-propelled howitzer in Western Europe. The Krab is a cancelled British turret on a Korean tractor. The man firing both of them preferred the Krab. Part 5. So why did Britain throw it away? Not out of incompetence. Britain wrote the requirement, funded the development, ran the trials, and got the ordnance right. Then it hit a propellant that could not be made safe, and it stopped. What Britain lacked was not engineering. It was the institutional refusal to let a solved problem stay solved. The programme was cancelled, the file was closed, and nobody reopened it for 20 years. Poland hit the same class of failure. Her chassis cracked. Her engine died. On any honest reading, her programme was in worse shape than Braveheart ever was. Poland replaced the broken component and kept the answer. Britain's metric was the programme. Poland's metric was the capability. Now be honest about what the Krab is not. It is not invulnerable. Its armour was never built for the war it is fighting. The Ukrainian analyst Alexander Kovalenko has been blunt about this. Of the Krabs lost or damaged, around half fell to Russian Lancet loitering munitions carrying warheads of 1 to 3 kilograms, and the Krab's protection was never enough to stop them. Crews weld cage armour over the roofs and hope. The vehicle is dense with automation, which makes it superb to fire and difficult to repair anywhere near the front. Damaged guns are dragged rearward, some of them the whole way to a hidden workshop in Poland. Independent visual documentation has confirmed dozens destroyed or damaged. That number will grow, and still Kovalenko's verdict, having catalogued those losses himself, was that it is more reliable, more precise, longer-reaching and more autonomous than anything Soviet-made that Ukraine had before. Moscow's line has been that the Krab will not cope with the Mstis and the Zyatzint. It is worth saying plainly why that claim collapses.